Hello and welcome to another episode of Media and More. I'm the mediocre modeler.
And this is Andre from Indie Arts Midwest. Thank you for joining us.
And we are starting this new endeavor. So we're going to start working on, we're going to go through the Andor episodes. And full disclosure, coming into this, I was not a fan of this show when it originally. I can't say that I wasn't a fan of the show. After I watched the whole thing, I came to a point where I was okay with it. But as
Mhm.
far as all the Star Wars we've seen so far, it was at the very bottom.
Okay. And why is that exactly?
It,
What were you looking
um,
for?
I honestly, okay. So you can't really talk about Andor without talking about his first appearance, and so we're first introduced to him in Rogue One.
Yeah.
As far as I was concerned, I knew everything I need to know about him in Rogue One.
Okay.
And so this, going back, so this starts, it's 5 years before the Battle of Yavin. And it was basically everyone wants to know, well, how, because the first scene we see with him in Rogue One, he meets with a contact and he kills him. And I don't know, maybe I'm just from a different era, but I'm just like, oh, okay, that's who this guy is. Okay, I'm okay with that,
Right.
and then we see his character growth. Well, everyone else in the universe apparently was just like, well, how did he come to this point? Blah, blah. And I just really didn't need that information. But based on the fact that we just got off of Acolyte,
Mhm.
this got bumped up.
Right.
So,
It was my first time watching the series, and I had forgotten that he was in Andor. In fact, I it didn't really click for me, and I know this
Rogue One.
sounds a bit silly or silly, Rogue One. Um, and it didn't click for me until about halfway in, and I was like, oh dang, because then I had the realization I'm watching a character who's going to die later, which is,
Mm-hmm.
like that happens in movies. But as you progress through the show, I grew to appreciate his character and his angle, and it's like, man, now I'm feeling this sense of dread. Like, oh, I don't
Yeah.
want anything to happen to you. Like, I really do. I liked the show for what it was, and I recall you mentioning that in this particular show, it was a lot more political,
Yes.
and I actually grew to appreciate that a lot more because, as I mentioned in Acolyte episodes, that a lot of these larger entities, whether they're the Empire or the Jedi, tend to dabble in societies. And a lot of times they either don't do enough research, as we saw in the Acolyte, or with the Empire, they have a ton of research and they throw that all to the side because they're looking for absolute control. And that is what I found really interesting about this show. And it was just nice to see how everything played out. And I liked seeing the Empire side of things. It was to see that their role and they're trying to um, sift their way through Coruscant, which we'll talk about later.
Right.
But
Well,
overall, I was impressed with the show.
I'll have to say, based on have since, like you said, I already know the story because I've only gone through it the one time as well,
Hmm.
and it doesn't bother me knowing he's going to die. All that just tells me there won't be this. Well, 5 minutes after, this is what he did. There are
Right.
bookends. We know we got the beginning. This is the beginning bookend, and we know what the end's going to be. Um, but also this after after seeing everything that I have seen of how badly things can be,
Yeah.
I am starting to have a different appreciation because I've already covered this in a video,
Hmm.
and I kind of forgot what I had said. So I'd watched the first video, and I asked myself, "Well, do you care? Does it feel Star Wars?" And that's always, does it feel Star Warsy? Do you care? And I asked myself a third question. I can't remember what it was, but it actually feels more Star Warsy going into it the second time
Right.
than it did the first time.
Yeah.
So, and since I know what's coming, I, I am a little bit more intrigued. I guess maybe not necessarily the political side, but you have to ask the question: how did the empire actually come to have so much power?
Right. Right.
And if there was a story that told that side of it, this is it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Um, so starting with something that you mentioned prior, the long intro.
Oh
I
yeah, yeah.
just did not care for basically 30 seconds worth of, you know,
The long the
Andor and the symbol.
oh
And
okay.
and I recall the first episode I watched and I was like, yeah, he was right. I do like the score for that series because that's something I always look for in all of these Star Wars shows. Like, what's the score? Like, does it sound good? And that's just something for me personally because I tend to hunt for remixes to things. And I know
Hmm.
you might think, like a lot of these shows don't need a remix, but
Right.
you'd be really surprised that some of the talented things that people come up with, like Mandalorian came out, and I good remixes for that. Um, Not a whole lot of people liked Book of Boba Fett. I did. Um, Definitely where the intro. I think that's what started it was the way that Mandalorian's intro was. I'm like, man, that's a solid song right
Yeah,
there. Like, I like
yeah.
this a
You know
lot.
what? Actually, what's funny is I was a little bit on the fence about Book of Boba Fett,
Hmm.
but I think I like the Book of Boba Fett intro song better than Mandalorian
Yeah,
because it's more matter of fact the way it is, uh, it's just very guttural.
yeah. I
So
I genuinely believe that without a good score matching with the show, it's just you're not gonna pull me in. Like there's something about a good score that gets me excited. Kind of like Hook.
no.
Like I grew up with you purchasing the soundtracks to movies, and like that's kind of a big deal. So I have a deep appreciation for movie soundtracks. Like if you get that wrong, then you might not
Well, right,
it
right.
might not work for me. I mean, not saying that I'm relying heavily on just the soundtrack, but it
But
definitely
yeah,
helps. We don't have
music
John
is
Williams
definitely
jumping on everything
right,
anymore,
right.
and we need John Williams. We need a new John Williams to do, like just to
There are some good
help.
good guys out there.
Yeah.
Uh, well, we'll have to have an episode purely about
Solely on
music.
soundtracks. That's going to be a tough sell.
But yeah, no, but
So we have,
Andor.
yeah, so we have the long intro and the intro music. I really like that. And then it starts with Cassian walking along a long bridgeway leading to the city while it's raining. And this is the planet of Morlana 1, which is the Preox Morlana corporate zone. And so we see Cassian headed into town. And he walks down a series of short steps. And on each side, you essentially see what's similar to the red light district.
Again, the red light districts
What were your thoughts on that?
well, it definitely sets a tone.
Oh yeah.
Because I mean, he's not going to he's not going to Bible study.
Right.
And you don't know what he's there for. So since
Right.
you already have it in the back of your mind that he's kind of a bad guy, and you find him in this red light district, you can only assume that he's going, maybe he's coming off of a kill, or he is on a kill.
Yeah.
So I, as it stands, I think it's perfect. I agree with you as far as that long walk across that causeway, but it does come into play later into the episode
Mhm.
why he was making that long walk. But yeah,
Right.
that whole environment as to where we're going, it definitely it fit.
Yeah. It
It
was a
it
good
fit the
shot.
character.
It was a
Yeah,
really good shot. The lighting was great. I actually
or the
saw
lack thereof.
someone. Yeah, there was somebody had just from reference photos modeled that bridge, and I was just
Oh
blown
wow.
away that people can do that type of thing. And so he
When you
arrives at the
say model, though,
door,
you're talking about computer modeling,
3D
not
modeled.
3D
Yeah,
3D model. Okay.
yeah. And so he arrives at the door of a club and he's checked by the guard. And the guy does this, no weapons, very general, just like you're not really even checking at all.
Right.
Just go your little spiel.
Yeah, but the street seemed like it was very empty anyway.
Yes.
So maybe it was, it was a Sunday night. Everyone was home because they had to be to work next day. I don't know.
Right.
I mean,
He
it was
just
very, very few people out.
just seems like he could have lied. Like, yep, I don't have any guns. Yep, nope, nope, no
But
credits, none of that. He had
but
like a little stick thing.
right. But I just don't understand. Why would you say no credits? Because you would have to have credits to be in there.
I'm not sure. Maybe I misheard, but
No, because I remember him
because he
saying,
said
I
I
thought
recall
that
him
was
hearing
weird too. No
saying it
credit.
twice. Yeah, like how do
Yeah.
we pay? And so he enters into the main entry and he surveys the scene. He's looking around, and then he heads to the bar. And the bartender brings him a drink and says, "You pay at the end." And mind you, as
Okay.
I'm watching the
I
show,
missed
I'm
that.
like, because I mean, the first few minutes I was confused. I didn't know who this guy was. I had forgotten that he was in Rogue One, and he's in this unknown planet. Which, mind you, all these planets in this show are new. They're new planets that they made for the show.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool. Um, so Officer One warns, "Don't even think about it. She'll send you home crying." And I'm like, who is this guy? Like
Right.
you're just already like I barely
Well,
got
see,
here.
did you get when you first saw them, did you know that they were officers?
I did get a security guard
Yeah.
officer
Right.
vibe from but that's also because it's just a standard movie trope.
Okay.
He looks over, I mean, at first I was like, he didn't even linger at that lady. He kind of did. And so, I mean, was that grounds for Officer One to say anything? Probably not. But, after that, there's a look that he had, at
Yeah, like
Cassian. Like
I'm a
he was just
regular and
ready.
you're just, yeah, I'm a
Yeah,
regular,
who's
you're
this
not.
guy?
Yeah, yeah.
Right. And so, um, let's see here. I was thinking, what did he do to not try to provoke this kind of level of hostility? And then the hostess walks up and with this ridiculous haircut.
Yeah.
Just I don't know what was going on with that. And
That's Star Wars just trying to be different again.
yeah,
It
it
is.
reminded me of a character from Dark Empire named Sala Zend. It's a black
Okay.
lady. She's talking to Han Solo for a short period. And her hair's similar. It doesn't do that weird complete flap top, but it's got a weird still triangular shape. So
Well,
I was thinking maybe
that
they
was the
cherry
inspiration.
picked, yeah,
Yeah.
that
Yeah, that could
inspiration.
be. Okay.
And
That's fair.
so after conversing with the hostess for a moment, Officer One starts getting impatient, and um, Officer Two kind of chimes in, excuse me, we were here first. I'm like, okay, here we go.
Right.
Like I already felt that coming. And so it kind of gave me the impression that, these guys are like the dirty cops of the
Yes.
of the area. And,
And doesn't
we
she
run this
even,
town.
didn't doesn't she even say that, oh, they're corset guards anyway, and
Playing
you know
cops.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's cool. Like, okay, you can brush that off, but still it's like, this is how you treat, visitors, I guess. Maybe it's a
Right.
corporate district thing. I don't know.
It is, well, because yeah, it said, yeah, it's, yeah, Proax Morlana corporate district. So
Yes.
and I that and that didn't mean much to me at the time, but it because you're just so, from my perspective, I'm used to everything being a part of the empire, and
Hmm.
this isn't. And at the time I didn't realize that that's why that was so important, because they're doing a good job of labeling everything.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So
It also said something along with that Preox Morlana thing. It said BBY5, and I did not
okay.
understand what that meant.
It said, um, BBY is before the Battle of Yavin.
Oh,
So it's
okay.
BBY
We're
5.
doing
5 years,
we're
yes.
okay. We're
And
doing like a
so,
Bible thing with
well, if you look at the literature, pretty much everything. If you go on Star Wars Wikipedia or whatever,
Mhm.
everything is going to be listed like so many years before the Battle of Yavin, or so many years after the Battle
After.
of Yavin, or they have certain markers, and
There's
so
like
you'll have like
timestamps.
two or three different time steps. So
Okay.
be wise before the Battle of Yavin.
I knew it was important. I just didn't know why.
What do you mean? Yeah, Joe Average wouldn't. So
Right. So, um, another background hostess walks up with the same goofy haircut. So obviously this is a style for
like
them.
on the planet, yeah, that's the planet
Yeah.
style.
And she greets the officer one, he turns and he's, talking in the background. And then we have Cassian and the first hostess, and he mentions that a friend of his said that there was a Canary girl working, and she asks him a few more questions, and then she says, "I'll go and check." And I found that kind of interesting because it's kind of like the little bird told me, and I didn't think that she was going to give away any information. It just
Right,
just based off of just a few vibes that like this is going to be. It seems like it's going to be a dead end, and
right.
so
It
she
seems like but she seemed like the madam. So it seems like, well,
yeah,
why did you even need to walk away? You would
right,
know.
right.
But I guess go, yeah, go. I'm sorry.
Oh no, it's okay. So she asks a few more questions, and then after she goes and checks, we cue Officer One again. And for some reason, he has a boner for Cassian. I don't know why. And he's like, "Is there something amusing?" And and Cassian's like, "What?"
Yeah.
And you keep looking over here like there's something funny. And I just don't get it. Like, dude wasn't even messing with you,
No,
man.
no,
Like,
he was picking. He was itching for a fight.
he was jealous. Yeah, well, yeah. I
Well,
mean,
but
obviously they have a play here.
right. I mean, if they're being the dirty cops or whatever, they're used to being able to push everybody around, and everyone probably, not necessarily parts when they come around, but they at least avoid them to give them some kind of power complex. So
I do like how the main hostess kind of shut that down. She was just like,
yeah.
for lack of better words, like chill out. Like someone will be over here to greet you in a moment. Um, and so let's see. Cassian says apparently not, and Officer Two, he has to jump in. What does that mean? And Cassian makes a serious face. I actually do like his serious face, like, dude, if you don't quit.
Right.
And it's like, oh, oh, no, we're getting serious now. And
And he's a smaller dude too, so
yeah,
people underestimate him because he's a smaller dude. They're just like, well, what are you gonna do?
right, pretty boy.
Right.
And so they have their little back and forths, and then the hostess comes back and says there was a girl from Canary, but she left a few months ago. And
Okay.
Cassian presses on a little bit and asks if she knows where she went, and then the hostess basically starts getting suspicious, and he follows up by mentioning that he's looking for his sister.
Yeah.
And so she says she's not here, she disappeared. I thought that was kind of odd. Like, you couldn't have led with that. That would have been a little more
Well,
helpful.
yeah, but I mean, if you're looking, so the hostess and all these people, they're trying to make their money,
Right.
and because I think she was asking him also, so who is this, sister,
Like,
wife, girlfriend? I mean,
right.
what's the deal here? So she's trying to gauge the level of trouble he's going to cause, or how,
Hmm.
what is his angle with this. But it's also from a adult perspective, I mean, because I think she even tried to play it like, hey, I can be a Canary girl too, because she's trying to get his credits.
Right.
So
Or we have another other girl with, pretty big brown eyes, if
right.
you're interested. Like,
Well, and then
no.
I guess the thing that I found interesting was she said, he said, well, did she leave a name? And it's just like, nobody leaves their real name here. What are you
Yeah.
talking about? So, and I never would
Right.
have thought of that. I mean, that's not a world I don't
Right.
travel in
Right.
the world, so I don't know if
Right.
but that would make sense, having a stage name or something. So to stay hidden in case you do need to change your identity. So,
Right. So she asks him to leave, And so he leaves the brothel and he's walking down the street. And then he gets called from behind by Officer One. And, then comes the extortion talk. And
The
then they ask for his
shakedown.
ID. And, Cassian's got his hands up and he turns around and just says, oh no, he doesn't turn around. He says, I have $300 or 300 credits in my pocket. You could just reach in and take it. It's fine. They're delighted by this info, but of course, that's not enough. So they throw on a little more extortion. And then
Well,
Officer
so
One,
I think that so part of that extortion was, which is why he was on that long causeway. He
yes.
had landed his ship outside the area, and that's where they were trying to say, like, oh, well, you're not allowed, guests aren't allowed to,
Hmm.
visitors to the planet aren't allowed to park out there. So there's going to be a fee for that. Oh, 300 credits. That sounds just about right.
Right. And he mentions the curfew and just all
Yeah,
this
it's
stuff.
throwing everything in there.
Right. And so Officer One uh pistol whips the back of his head. And it's like, dude, I already told you where the money is. And then he's like, other pocket. So the guy reaches into the other pocket, and then Cassian headbutts Officer Two. And then that causes Officer One to fire his gun. Cassian grabs, they have a little tussle. And I already knew this situation. The moment that he called behind him, I was like, this is not gonna end well.
Right, right,
And
right.
so they have their little tussle, and he essentially pushes Officer Two off of him. He falls, gets control of the gun, points it at Officer One, and then he screams at him to get up. And I was like, okay, it
This,
could end right here, if you just run off. But unfortunately, after he tells him to get up, and Officer One's trying to shake him, and he's like, he's not waking up. He's dead. And and Cassie's just like, no, like, yeah, he's dead. So Officer One comes up with this a ridiculous
yeah,
story,
yeah. I
and
mean, okay, based on where they are and what they were doing, it probably could have worked because he was just like yeah, because they do shady stuff all the time. This isn't new for them,
right.
and so he's probably like, well, hey, yeah, if there was a misunderstanding and we got into and he fell down and it was a complete accident. He even tried to get him in on it, just like if we
We
go in
can
on
go
this
together.
together, we
Yeah,
could
no,
just
that's where he failed. Like
yeah.
that was the line that got him killed right
So
there.
you think?
Oh
Okay,
yeah, oh yeah.
so here's my question for you:
That.
had he given them the credits, do you think that would have been the end of it? Do you
Oh
think they would have
no.
roughed him up anyway?
Oh yeah, for sure. Or
So
tried to extort more out of him, and probably would have tossed him in jail.
so
Because that's
so,
what they do.
so in your opinion, there's no way that he gets out of this without having to kill them both.
I I didn't think initially he was going to kill Officer One.
Well, that was a complete accident.
Yeah.
But that's
Well,
the
that was Officer
that's
Two was the accident, the smaller guy.
oh yeah, yeah, the small, yeah, yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
then when he had it pointed at him, and then like his story was it just wasn't sounding good enough, and then phew, done. And then we cue to Cassian running off to the ship,
Yeah.
and so yeah, I don't think there's any other way that could have ended. I mean, there he wouldn't. I mean, did it have to end with both of them dying? One would like to hope not, but I mean, we're talking about a very large galaxy here, so I mean,
Right.
anything could happen to anyone.
Even if he, I still think the guy was enough of a weasel that if he got out of that situation, he probably would have had access to maybe some camera footage, and he probably would have still put out a some kind of bulletin to get the guy because he just that's just who he is.
Yeah,
He wouldn't have let it go. He wouldn't have let it go. So
I could
he didn't have a choice but to kill him.
I could see him at least going back to his superiors and saying, "Hey, this is what happened. We didn't catch the guy. He ran off. We don't know." And maybe there would have been an investigation. Maybe not. He probably could have gotten in trouble, as we'll find out
Yeah,
shortly.
yeah. Well, what were you over there for anyway?
Exactly,
So
exactly. And so Cassian runs back to the ship, and we get a nice view of it taking off and leaving the planet, and I noticed it had those that bomber ship engines
The
on
the
it.
the, the Y wing, yeah,
Yeah, I really
the Y
liked
wing
that
style.
because I hadn't seen it in a while. Or at least maybe I haven't been paying attention, but it just been had quite a long time since I'd seen those engines on the back
Yep.
of any ship, and it was a nice change. It was a weird, interesting contrast between the front of the ship and the rear. It just
It's
kind
like
of
they
like
didn't, almost like they didn't match.
yeah, they didn't, yeah,
Yeah,
like it was kit bashed.
yeah.
So that would be I wouldn't be surprised, because it does kind of make me question like who are the designers behind a lot of these ships that we've seen throughout the series, not necessarily from our real world perspective, but in their universe, like who's going in
Oh,
and designing a mass production of Y wings or
oh,
whatever.
I could tell you. In I think it's Incom. Because there's like two different companies. There's the company that makes the X wings and Y wings, and then there's a different company that makes the Tie fighters. But I think Incom, I think, is the ones that makes. Well, anyway, that's another show.
I recall seeing something about during this time as well as in Acolyte. We don't see a whole lot of mass production, so there's a lot of custom ships being made, and that actually makes a lot of sense. Which is why not all, but there are quite a few ships that are unique in their design because they're just kind
Yeah,
of
yeah.
slapped together, and
Well, I
that's
think
fine.
on the lower end of the spectrum, you get. I can see that on the lower end of the spectrum. Well, okay, so and this makes sense when we get to where Andor was heading.
Right. And so the next scene, we see a droid traveling through a town on Ferrix, the free trade sector, and he hides from some alien dogs and shocks one of them for peeing on him. I love that we keep the trope of the droid with the little taser thing. It's like that's standard for
Well,
all
yeah.
droids to have a little taser. What other purpose does it have though? Like, is that it? I feel like, it's just kind of a deterrent. It's never really been revealed that it serves. And I
I
believe
don't know.
that.
Well,
Right, right.
it could be that I don't know.
Yeah. And so the bot travels through the junkyard and he makes his way to an old ship where we find Cassian sleeping. And he's trying to wake Cassian up, and then he says Cassa
Yeah,
twice.
yeah.
And in the dream, we get a flashback to Canary, as Cassa's sister wakes him up, and then we see that it's a bunch of children living in a small encampment, and in the distance, they're seeing a ship crashing down on their planet. And I didn't catch this the first time I watched, mainly because I don't know why I was so concerned about there were no subtitles.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's not a big deal, but I'm starting to notice that happens a lot in movies as of lately, where they're just like,
Like, speaking of
blah,
foreign
blah,
language, yeah,
blah,
yeah.
blah. We're just not going to put subtitles, so don't worry about what they said. You just context, just fill in your own context. And that's fine. But, like, I know that they were probably saying trivial things, but still,
Right. But
it
you
would have
know
been
what?
nice.
I didn't notice that until the second flashback that they weren't
Hmm.
speaking English and that there were,
Right.
and I think much like you, I was absorbed with looking at, because we're looking at the culture, looking
Hmm.
at the kids, and because I thought Space Lord of the Flies.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a
Because
good angle
yeah,
for
because I'm
sure.
just like, because it screams it's just children.
Hmm.
So
They still know their hierarchy though, because the older
right,
ones are
right.
obviously telling the younger ones what to do. And let's see here.
I did find it interesting as the ship was flying by, everyone is looking up at it. And there's one girl that starts waving, just like,
Hey,
ah,
survivor! Now I do
yeah,
recognize that word.
oh,
Yeah,
and then like the lead child girl chastised, she's like, stop it, what are you doing?
right.
So, so that kind of sets the tone for what we've got going on here as well. I mean, like they're
Hmm.
out here, but maybe they're not trying to be rescued. They're hiding or something.
Yeah, I didn't get the I had no idea what was going on with that. For me it was just like, oh, another flashback. You know,
You know what? I didn't mind
it
these
was
flashbacks.
context.
These were
Um,
good. I like these
they were
flashbacks.
good. I get so stuck on tropes with movies
Yeah,
and
yeah.
shows that I have to kind of learn to let go when I see new stuff. But I would say that the flashbacks in this series were well timed.
Yes.
But there were other
And
parts
they
where it's
weren't that
like,
long.
yeah,
They were well timed and they were really short.
there were a few who are like, why now? Like it was just getting to, and then but so we cut back to the present, and Cassian's awake now, and he asks where he was, and Cassian basically just says it's not important. And he also asks who came by last night, and the droid says Jessian came by to drop off some medicine to Marva. So we get at least an idea that he's got this home life here, and that there are
Hmm.
people who are important to him who are looking for him and just wondering about his well-being. So that was really nice. And then he asks if anyone's looking for him, and he then asks the droid to lie for him. And I thought it was really interesting where obviously the droid is aged
Yes.
to a point where it has to choose between memory storage and power conservation, which is not something we see particularly in the Star Wars franchise when it comes to like all the
Right.
other bots. They're just kind of like ready to go, and they'll. So I like that. But it just seemed like it just hadn't been that long, and so like it even has to factor in its journey there and back in like all
Right.
of this.
Right. So
It's
I mean,
really
this seems like he okay. He looks all old rundown, and I made a reference to him reminding me of one of the old beat up droids in the old Disney movie, um, uh, the Black Hole.
okay. I
The
don't think
same
I've seen
kind of
that.
color. Yeah, it's not one of my favorites, but
Mm,
I mean, it's got some good. It's got some good stuff and bad stuff to it. It's not pew pew type sci-fi per se, um, but I think the droid gives you a pretty good idea of what's going on. He's a good representation of the life on this planet, kind of
right.
run down, kind of backward, just kind of.
Right.
It's a he's on a dirt road, that they were traveling on. So you kind of get and Andor sleeping in a junked up spaceship. So you kind of get an idea of where they are.
Yeah. I look forward to printing a little mini version of that droid. I really liked him. And I think that in that short period of time, they I don't want to say humanize, but it's nice to
Oh,
see when droids have emotion. There was a couple of like when he was like, "Oh, can I come with you?" And he's like, "No, not this time." And he's like, "Oh," and I just like
right.
I like how
Well,
they.
and he stuttered too. I mean, a part of
Hmm.
his I don't know if that was he did it through the whole thing, but like the first voicing, he's like he's got a stutter too. So,
Yeah,
but obviously, Cassian cares for this bot, this
yeah.
droid. So,
It
yeah,
makes me think of there's an episode in The Mandalorian, the latest season, where they go on that planet with Jack Black as like the king
mhm,
or whatever. But in that bar, all the droids were basically trying to voice their humanity, essentially. Like, we don't want to die. And I just found
mhm,
that to be really interesting. It had me looking at the entire spectrum of droids in that universe way a little differently because, that makes sense. They literally just want to serve. Like that's what they're designed to do. I just think that's
yeah.
really cool. And so when I see, because we've been seeing droids, showed that side of themselves throughout all of the Star Wars franchise. But I don't know. It's really cool when they do it right on a show or just in a storytelling in general.
Well, and not to keep picking on Acolyte,
Hmm.
I think they've done these. This droid has been on screen for all of what 2 minutes,
Hmm.
and you're endeared to him. Where it took 8 episodes, and I still don't like Pip.
Yeah, Pip is
So,
just a yeah. it-
I
They
mean,
tried.
yeah,
They tried with some of his interactions. I do think that the banter back and forth between Osha and Pip was interesting while it lasted, but I mean, like
Right.
once she didn't have
But
anymore, he didn't matter, and that kind of sucks because that was her
yeah,
droid. But you know, I
I
totally
think
agree with that.
they do that. So, and they do that with pretty much most people that have a droid in the Star Wars universe. I kind of call it the boy and his dog
Hmm.
deal, which that in and of itself is kind of a trope,
Right.
but for this universe or these universes, it works. So at least it works
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
That's what makes it feel Star Warsy to me.
I do like the part where he was like, "That's two lies."
Right, right. Like,
Like,
dude, you're eating up my data. Come on.
right. That was just good. Like, yeah, but you're right. They really do find a way. Like, if you do it, if done right, you can connect with certain characters in the way that they're expecting you to.
Yeah.
And so, then Cassian says, don't tell anybody you saw me, and I kind of jumped ahead with the two lies, but yeah, don't tell anybody you saw me or know where I am.
Yeah.
And then we cut to a view of a very lively town in Ferrix as Cassian goes to visit Brasso. Um, and so he waits for him to come outside, which I don't know about that entry. So I was a little confused about how that worked, but because they came out from the two, I don't like that door that they had. There
Yeah,
were like
the
two.
double circle. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just really odd
So I
looking,
was
but
I'm like, so are you coming out of a subway or a
like a
mine? What?
manhole.
Yeah, I was
Yeah, I
like,
did think
what?
mine at first.
So
At
did I.
first,
But
but
they went over to that. There was that wall with all the
with
gloves on,
gloves,
and so
yeah,
they came out of there. They went over to the wall, and everyone got their gloves. And I noticed. I don't know if this is going to come to light later, but you noticed like 99% of the squares had gloves in it, but you just had one or two that was missing gloves.
I
So
did not notice that.
it makes me think. I'm like, so what happened to that guy? Is he
Right.
working, or because this is obviously like roll call or something? It's just like everyone had their spot, and so everyone went over there and they grabbed their gloves, and then that's when I guess Brazel sees Kazian
Hmm.
and they start talking.
Yeah, and that's when Cassian feeds him this story about, this is where we were last night. I really like the way that he just immediately knew what Cassian was trying to convey, and he just starts playing into the lie. Like, all right, I like this guy, and he's only been
Yeah,
on screen for a few seconds. Like
right,
I've seen that type of character before, and of course, this is a new show, so you're questioning, okay, who can this character trust?
right.
And they established that very quickly with the droid and then with Brazel. And so I don't know, just kind of help bring whatever they have going on in that town to life a little bit more, along with, his little walkway through the town. You get to see all the different aliens. And I don't know why I liked the spread of aliens in this show versus the Acolyte. I don't know. They just seemed better. There's something about putting like on a fairly desolate planet, it just works. Um, whereas there was a few situations in Acolyte where it felt forced. Like I don't know
Yeah,
about maybe the costume design wasn't up to par with whatever. They have different producers for the show, so
right.
but whoever made the show, they should do more because they know how to make it feel like Star Wars. And so they come up with this scenario about the whereabouts where he was last night, and then we cut
Well,
back to
I like the fact that so obviously Cassian's hand is wrapped up because he hurt his
mm,
hand.
right.
He could tell he was in a fight because the guy even says, "You look horrible." That's the
Hmm.
first thing he says to him. And so when they're making up the lie, he adds on to the lie by incorporating his portion of it, which includes a fight,
Yeah,
which would explain his wounds. And when I woke up in the morning, you were gone. So yes,
right.
I absolutely love this guy.
Yeah, he's a solid character for sure. Um, the cuts from location and planet to planet are pretty heavy in this series, and it made writing notes for this very easy. But at
Mm,
the same time, it's like, oh, we're cutting here.
right.
Okay, this is 3 to 5 minutes. All right, now we're cutting here. Okay, so I look forward to hopefully easy notes because I blew through all of these in about 30 minutes, and then halfway through I was like, all right, fast forward because I've seen
Mm,
this.
okay.
I know what they're gonna say here, whatever. And so now we're back on Morlana 1, where we now see a very uptight and well put together Cyril. And I don't know, just within just the first few minutes, I'm like, I already feel like this guy is going to be annoying. And I
Mm-hmm.
love how the supervisor mentions his uniform and how, and he's like, I had it altered. It's like, yeah, of course you did.
Right. I hate to do this, but this is the core sick version of Yord.
Yeah, I don't
he,
know
he
who's worse though, because
mm,
this guy,
this guy.
I had a feeling from the moment was on screen, I'm like, he's going to be a problem. I
Yeah.
can already
Yep.
tell.
Yep.
And and like the way that he was put together, I mean, like he's just a very sharp individual, by the book. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
And so he tells the supervisor, this situation took place on Morlana and in the corporate district, where there's been two murders. And I really like how the supervisor just kind of initially brushed it off once he started to, it's the trope of the one in charge knows a lot more than
Yeah,
the
the
guy who comes to
grizzled, the
bring him
grizzled
info.
old, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
compared
I
to
just
the young whipper. I'm gonna take over the world, young. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah. And so we find out that Officer Two, Kravis, is the one who died, and I like how the supervisor gives insight about Kravis's background. He was like, he was lucky that he wasn't killed years ago,
yeah.
and he's one of the most unpleasant people I've ever met. Just like, yeah, that
So
sounds about
so
right.
so this, even though this the head guy here seems like he's blowing everything off, he's as he's enough knows enough about his job that he knows these guys by name, or at
Right.
least this guy by name, and
And
well, he's probably the
character.
one that put him there, So
I
yeah,
wouldn't be surprised. I mean, it's unfortunate they have fairly decorated backgrounds, for through the military and whatnot. It's like, but you go off and then you do this. So,
yeah,
and you don't think that that guy's gonna know about that too. And so then we get into the fact that there were no suspects so far, and we have excellent leads. And so that kind of goes back to what you were saying before about, like maybe there was some kind of camera footage or something like that. And then it's like, obviously they were on, like in some kind of back alleyway.
right,
Nobody saw or heard anything. And honestly, in that moment after Cassian took that shot, I was considering like nobody saw this. Like, how are they
right.
gonna find out? Like, there's no
Well,
proof. But you have the lead of their last whereabouts. So obviously they went back to the brothel and was like, hey, when was this
well,
guy
I mean,
last
I'm sure
seen
that,
and who
yeah,
was in here?
they should have, I'm sure they would have had to check in.
Hmm.
And when they didn't check in, they had to have come looking for him. So,
Oh yeah.
and I think they did. And like I said, the commander was like, "Oh, I was in this district." Oh, because I find it interesting that because what's getting ready to happen,
Hmm.
he's coming up with a lie. It says,
Yeah, tough
"Okay,
case, bad timing
yeah, you
is
need
what
to
he
write a
said.
report. Yeah, move it outside of the blah 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 district so nobody cares about it. The I wrote that down. The luxury the leisure district. Move it outside the leisure district so it doesn't
Yeah.
make up any red flags, and just let's put it to bed. This guy isn't worth the time or the energy.
Right. And he went in on them though. He was like, oh, they were in this district. They're not supposed to be there.
Right.
They don't make enough, they shouldn't really be making enough money to be in this area.
I
They're
didn't catch that
drinking
until now.
what? Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
They're not supposed to
yeah,
have that either. So it's like, yeah,
yeah.
he
And
was
they were
really
probably on the
educated.
clock. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, right. Well educated. So he already knew what's up. It's like, I mean, yes, he's throwing them under the bus, but at the same time, where is he? They were in the wrong
yeah,
heavily. So, you know, if it were a lesser officer or super, or I guess what was he? Because there's a name for him. He is the deputy inspector.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and so if there were a lower quality, I think they would have just went along with it. Like, yep, you're right. And it kind of, knowing how this show ends, this is the key point in which it could have been brushed to the side, and then Cassian would have been able to succeed, which we'll talk about later on, and then all
Hmm.
of what would have transpired wouldn't have worked, went in this direction. I mean, there would be no real struggle to get to the end. So like this is with the defining moment with him asking, I think it's Cyril. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Um,
I'll have to look.
yeah.
I was going through it, so I didn't catch all the names.
Yeah,
So
and then I looked through I looked up the cast, and sometimes the names don't add up, and then the
right.
actor doesn't always look exactly the same as they did, and so it's like they'll like Cyril's character, he was bearded now, so it's like, I think that's
That's
him.
right.
Um, and so you could just tell he's clenching up by hearing this
Yeah.
information because he was ready to go. I've been searching all this information last all night, and then now you tell me this. And then of course, like I said, he mentioned the tough case, bad timing, because they had an Imperial Regional Command review coming up, and the goal of them reporting was on behalf of the crime rate. And
Right.
so it's like, why now? I get that, but it's like, I do understand a big reason why he wanted to keep it under wraps, because even though this is a corporate entity, they're still working for the empire, and they don't want them on their backs either.
Right.
And that's kind of a long-standing realm of thought that I've seen throughout many of these shows. It's like some of these people are just trying to get by. It's like, yeah, we don't like the empire, but like we just, if we can keep them at arm's length, then I'm not saying that it'll be fine, but it's definitely better than what it could be. So,
Well, I mean, this kind of gives you a perspective of where we actually are because, like I said, up until now, everything we normally do, we know is a part of the empire, right?
hmm,
But now we're saying, oh, there's a hierarchy here. These people are patrolling themselves,
right,
and because he says to the guy, you'll learn later in life that brevity is the answer. And
yes,
if you have to ever give this speech, brevity is the key because he's roughly minimizing the empire's uh, thinking about this area is paramount. We want
right,
to think about this part as little as possible. It's peachy
right.
keen over here, and let's just leave it at that.
And what one could say, that's the running thing with Ferrex as well. Like they
Yeah,
just
yeah.
want to be in their town and essentially be
Just
left
let us do our
alone.
thing. Leave us alone.
And that'll probably be something I bring up quite a bit, not just with the show, because I already talked about that with, just like that lack of understanding on behalf of all these cultures that you're consuming and trying to control. And it's like, maybe if you played into whatever they got going on a little bit, they might be a little more welcome to you. But what you guys do is you
Yeah,
swoop
yeah, yeah.
in,
Yeah.
and then you are the authoritarian entity in this area, and now people hate you. And that's how you kind of created your own rebellion.
Yeah,
Um,
well, so I like if everybody was as laid back as that commander.
hmm.
Yeah, it was because as he walked out of the office, he says, "Don't put your feet on my desk while I'm
Yeah,
gone,
I'm gone.
unless there's a report under it."
Right. I love
so,
that.
so, so he's just kind of laid back. I'm like, oh, no stuff goes on, but let's
And
just kind of.
you could tell that it was just not enough for Cyril. I mean,
Oh
like
yeah,
he appears to
he
be
was
that.
chomping at the bit, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the last thing he wants to do is, push this situation to the side. And to be fair, like, yes, you did lose two employees, and, that is still important to what, and, he's very dedicated to his job. So, I mean,
Yeah,
like, you can't blame him for that level of concern, but obviously outside of that, he's a very
yeah.
over the top guy. Um, so we cut back to Ferrex, and we see that Cassian is headed to visit Bix Colleen so that he can ask her for a favor. And so, he goes through the shop, and the boyfriend's like, she's in the back. He goes on, he goes on, And well, we're not entirely sure that he's the boyfriend yet. It's
Right.
just some guy, but it's revealed a few minutes later that that's who he is. And so that's just I'm just referring to him as the boyfriend because
Yeah. Yeah.
that's just the vibe that you get pretty immediately. So Cassian's asking her, hey, can you call the contact? I need to get something sold quickly. And she's like, well, I have some stuff that I'm trying to get rid of, and he should be here, or someone should be coming along by the end of the week. And Cassian goes, that's not enough time. I need them to, come now, essentially.
Yeah.
And
And
she
so, and she
goes,
noticed that he's been beat up too. So she's
yeah,
like, oh crap, here we go.
right. And she's like, well, what is it? And then he reveals that it's a, what is it? An untraceable star path unit.
Okay.
And so you were talking about how prior to all of this, we had Venestra who could navigate without these.
Yes.
And so there had to have been a time frame where they were possibly using individuals like her to map the star system as well as their own information to kind of like create these star path units. I thought initially, because, well, as we'll see in later episodes, that he got that star path unit from long ago.
Right.
But she's like, oh, is this from one of, my previous jobs? I'm not sure, you know, maybe there was some expectation to split everything even, and maybe he like grabbed something on the way out. I don't know for sure, but I feel like she was a little too upset about him having this. It's like, dude, you've been doing your own deals and
Right.
all this.
Right.
So it's like, what, like, of course I may go off. What if he had found it on his own? Like, who cares? I don't know. She just
Well,
took it a little too
but I mean,
personal.
but and he brought it back to her because he threw
Yeah,
it in her face. He was just like, hey, yeah, I have this. It doesn't matter where I got it, but you've been skimming off the top too. So what are we
right,
doing here? So yeah. But at this point, you still don't have an idea of what he does.
right.
So he's not doing a 9 to 5 like the other guy.
Yeah.
She's working in a shop, so she looks like a because she was taking an engine apart or something, disassembling
Hmm.
an engine. So um, you get the impression that she's doing that's her 9 to 5. We still
Yeah.
don't know what Cassian does.
I also forgot to mention that we're on the back end of episode 3. And so, w- right, we're on the back end of episode 3. And so we're in that in between phase between 3 and 4 where um, it seems like there's like the Empire did its job for that particular time frame, but now it is more of a controlled entity
Yes, yes. They've
rather
established
than
they're established. They don't have
yeah.
complete control, but they are definitely established. Yeah.
Yeah, they're trying to build up on that. And so like obviously there was a time where people felt like they needed them because of the separatists, but now it's like, okay, well, why are you guys here?
Right.
So
Yeah.
I do understand the sentiment behind all that. That's the point I wanted to make. And so the boyfriend is kind of like, you know, being a little nosy, and he seems suspicious and slightly jealous. And as Cassian is on his way out, they kind of have a few remarks back and forth about Bix. And then Cassian replies, you better find yourself a less complicated woman. Good luck with that.
Right.
It's like, I don't know what you think we got going on. I just know her from a long time ago, and
Right. Right.
I'm not even no, just no. So I did like that, but it's like, dude, I mean, like you already got her, man. Just it's fine. Like he's just
Honestly, I kind of thought she I, when I first saw when they first started talking,
Mhm.
I thought, well, maybe they're related. You
I did
know,
too. Yeah,
just like because and maybe we were supposed to think maybe they were related and there was another sister that they were looking for or something.
right.
But then you get that little bit of because I think they get a little
Like a
bit too
moment.
close,
Yeah,
and you're like, so were they an item? So yeah, there are questions there,
right.
but but so he asked her because they were, they had a look because he came out to the office and said something to her, and she goes, "Oh yeah, da 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 da,"
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's something that needed to be. Why are those blah 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 still over there or
and
something
just
like that?
like
Or maybe that's later.
that could have waited. She gave him that look like, "Why are you asking me? That could have waited." But um, that's when Cassian kind of gets the idea of, are you so whatever has going on between those two has
Right.
happened recently, but it felt like she's playing an angle.
Hmm.
Whereas the other guy, he's in love.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And I mean, I could sense the slight jealousy there,
Yeah, yeah,
I'm just a simple
yeah,
junkyard shop
yeah.
guy and
Cassian's the
you're
bad boy.
yeah, you're going on these little adventures and
Right.
all beat up and stuff. But yeah, I mean, that's easy to let go. It's just like, all right, just cut it out, guy.
Yeah, yeah.
Um and so we have another flashback to Kanari, and the children are prepping to head towards the down ship, and of course he says something to his sister. I was kind of like through visual context, it was probably like, hey, what's going on, are you about to try and go with them? And he probably said, yeah, I'm definitely going to try. And so they have this fire going on, and they're like using
Yeah,
the ash to like do like little tribal uh paint, I guess, or and one of the older kids contests first
yeah. He
that
tries to
about
stick his
Casa
hand in
going,
to put some paint on. And he just smacks his hand like, "What are you doing?"
yeah. And of course, the older girl probably said something along the lines of, "Oh, he's old enough,
Yeah,
if
he's old
something
enough. Yeah.
happens,
Let,
it's
us give
fine."
him a shot, and if
Right,
he don't make it, that's on him.
right.
Yeah.
And I think I do see the importance of these little miniature scenes. It's just as we go along, it starts to raise more questions than answers. So I may have to look into some information about Canare because I do find it very intriguing. I know that there is a history that they do discuss later on in the show, but as far as, like,
I think at the time, um, there there wasn't any. And I tried to look into this, and maybe we need to look into this for the next Star Wars show,
mhm,
because I think maybe Brendock was mentioned in the other story, but it didn't go too in depth. But there might be something in Wikipedia, so I don't
mhm,
know if they do that for this one. Was Kanari in the system before Andor? So, and did they just
right.
do a little blurb and just put it up in Wikipedia? That way, you have just a little bit of information, because we don't even know where it is in the star system. Because, like
He
you said,
said
all these
he
planets are
said is
new, right?
yeah, but he said it's a mid rim system or
Oh,
a
okay,
planet
okay,
in the mid rim.
okay.
So that I mean, like we have somewhat of a location, but I mean beyond the planet's history, they only feed into it a bit in the show. Like,
Okay.
but I'm just really intrigued about all that. Um, so we cut back to Ferrex, and we find Cyril, who is displeased with the supervisor's approach to the situation and decides to investigate on his own, as we
Of
all know
course
that
he
he was going
does.
to do. So he goes into this little office where I guess this particular officer is supposed to be watching the entry and exits of ships
Like a
within
air
that
traffic
planet.
controller, yeah.
Yeah. And so he kind of presses him a little bit, and the guy was like, "Well, you're expecting me to filter all these out? That could take, all night or whatever." And he's like, "Well, I guess you should basically get started now, huh?" Um,
Well, yeah, because if you don't want to do it, somebody else. I'm sure someone else wants to
right.
sit in that chair. And I noticed where he kind of looked at the other people, they didn't turn around at all. They were just
Hmm.
kind of, they're like, I didn't want none of
Yeah.
that.
And of course, Cyril obviously has a vibe amongst everyone. So it's like everybody knows, yeah, this guy's a stickler. So I'm sure
Yeah.
they're not the only ones who are clenching up when he comes around, as we will see later.
Right.
Um, and so they have an idea on the ship's exit. And I did kind of skip ahead, so I missed any lines about they didn't actually place what the ship was, but they knew that it was using
Yeah.
a system that was meant to be uh hidden, or what's the word I had here? Do do do. whatever the device that they had. It's supposed to be like
Oh, I think
it's
I did.
hard
I
to
write that.
track. Untraceable. That's the word. It's supposed to be
Okay.
untraceable. So they can see, like, obviously we see a ship entering and exiting, but we don't know where it was headed or where it came from. Um, and so I thought that was kind of interesting with the screen. I love how they stick to their the Star Wars standard
Yeah.
interfaces. Um, let's see here. I'm just trying to get through my notes here. And the officer, basically, operator is tasked with filtering it out, and all entries to find it. And so then we cut back to Ferrix, and Cassian is stopped by some other merchant guy whom he owes
Yeah.
money to. I didn't get that guy's name.
Yeah, I don't think they even gave it. Yeah, the little shakedown. Yeah.
I forgot to check the cat because I meant to add him in because he's
Well,
like
because I
the
wrote
only
down
one I didn't
shake
get.
down by local guy and fetch.
Yeah. That guy was. I love the he. I just wrote that he brought in the muscle,
Right.
but the muscle wasn't very bright. Like I was
Well,
just
it's
told to
funny. He
stand
goes like,
here.
yeah, he's like, "Are you with him now, Fetch? What?
So they did good.
You need muscle lessons."
Right. But I mean, like, as far as his look, yeah, I mean, like, that's a solid looking alien,
Oh yeah,
good
no,
guy.
he looked really good. There
Yeah.
was an alien a little bit earlier in the episode that was when all the people were getting off the elevator or whatever. He's a real big. I think he's like wearing like a yellow environmental suit, and he was kind of lumbering along. He looked like a guy in a big rubber suit. This looked like a proper alien. The
Right.
Fetch looked like a proper alien. So I'm like,
Even with it being CGI,
yeah,
which I don't know. I'd really like to see them go back to more practical effects when it comes to that. Um, only and that's only because obviously we've all been not necessarily burned out, but it's standard with that
I
particular character design. And I understand that there are challenges, but I mean, with
yeah.
George Lucas, and his team of
Well,
people,
the thing about it is everybody wants to be in one camp or the other, and I
hmm
think the actual answer is you can't be in one camp or the other. The way what works
right,
is both. You have to. It's got to be a mix of both. In this particular situation, we're going to use practical, but in this particular situation, we're going to use digital. And
yeah,
sometimes you need to use a blend of the two. So
yeah.
I don't live in one camp or the other,
I
despite
would
the
like to
fact that
see a
I'm a Hero
blend
Kamala.
more. Yeah. A blend would be, I think, more beneficial. It'd be softer on our eyes because I mean it's
Yeah,
either
yeah,
hard in one direction or the other, and yeah, I'm pretty sure they do it, to some
yeah.
degree, and we
If
just
they
don't
do it
even
and we don't
notice.
notice that, that
Yeah,
means they
and
did it
they did a good
right.
job. Yeah,
Yep.
that's right.
Right.
And so Cassian wiggles out of this situation very easily. Um, but I don't really trust that guy. You can already tell. Like normally shakedown guys are probably going to be a problem later.
Yeah.
And so then we cut back to a still suspicious BF who um, sees Bix preparing to leave. She gets off the little computer thing, and then he goes and then checks to see what she was doing, which I don't think it was really revealed if he came up with anything. But then he decides to follow her through the town to see where she's going, and so she loses him in the crowd, which I
Well,
knew that was coming.
She didn't know he was following her.
No.
So she didn't necessarily lose him. He lost her because
Yes.
he ran into somebody, and so she was moving fast enough to where she took off. So she wasn't
Sh-
trying to evade him. He just couldn't keep up.
Right. And I mean, I kind of saw it as her, like, she probably always moves through.
Hmm.
And when she's doing that, she probably, like necessarily, because it could be anybody following her for all she knows. So yeah, I think she's already used to that, I would
Right.
assume.
Right.
And so he loses her, and then she stops by this little tinker shop, and that's another character I did not get his name because I know he's a memorable one for later. I
Yeah.
really liked him, actually. Him and his son, they were two very solid characters in the show. And she asks for a part, but that part is actually a cover for her to make a call to her contact in this little mini radio tower that he has set up. And so she goes and does that, and then we cut back to Morlana 1, where Cyril addresses a team of workers to do more digging on the recent murder, as well as any information they happen to have on Ferrex. And this goes into what we were talking about before, where everybody's just like, "Oh, this guy."
Yeah, everyone. Did you notice the blue noodles?
No.
Yeah. So the guy's like eating his lunch, and it's like blue ramen noodles.
He tends to
Eh,
catch people off guard. He's really
yeah.
good at that.
Yeah, and they were just, and everyone knows his story. They're just like, oh God, this guy, just like, hold on, so everyone's like, well, let's kind of get back to work. And I don't know what you've gotten written down there, but he's just like, well, what did we find? And he's just like hammering them.
Yeah.
Um, uh, and they start talking about Ferrex, and the lady that was there, like the guys kind of seemed like they were kind of jumping too. She wasn't buying his crap, and she's just like,
Hmm.
"Do you know about Ferrex? Have you ever been to Ferrex?" And he's like, "Why? What does it matter?" Yeah, and I think at that point he was saying something about, um, well, don't you people understand that two officers were killed? He
Yeah.
kind of lost it, and everyone was just like, okay,
Right. Why is anybody as angry about this as I am?
yeah, right. But the lady says they kind of like doing things their own way.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I don't know if you know about, like, in the old Star Wars lore, that's kind of the way they talk about Corellia. Like Han Solo is a Corellian.
Okay.
The Corellians kind of do things their own way. You kind of don't just, you can get what you need to get from them. Just kind of let them do it their way.
Hmm.
Just leave them alone, let them do it, and you're fine. And that's what she was trying to get across to uh, Deputy Inspector Cyril.
Yeah.
So
We'll have to side note, we'll have to talk about Solo. I really liked it. So
okay,
I'd
I
like
love
to
that.
I'd like to fly through that one.
Okay.
Yeah. And so he asks about Canary, and there are obviously limited results. So they're like, we don't have a whole lot for you there. And so we cut back to Ferrex, and Cassian is found by, I guess, this shipyard owner, and
Uh,
I'm not
I,
sure
I,
what that guy was.
he was more like the yard, because he had those two dog creatures with
Yeah.
him. He was more like the security guard.
Okay. I didn't know if he was like the owner of the property. That makes more sense.
Yeah, no,
He just
because
like the
yeah,
groundskeeper.
yeah, because he goes, "What are you doing here? So and so's in the office," and he kind of grabs his radio, just
Oh, right.
yeah.
Right. I did like that conversation. I mean, in that moment, we realized that wasn't his ship, and he's like taking
He's
out the
borrowing it.
right. So he's swapping the Star Path units out, and so the guy basically is just scouring him about that, and he's like, just put everything back, and then just leave, just don't come back. And I wasn't. It doesn't bother me that he was borrowing the ship, but it's like,
Hmm.
dude, like, like you just kind of cheating everybody in this little town
Yeah,
a little
yeah,
bit. I mean,
a
they're all
little
kind of
bit.
sick of you, but also they care for you. It's a really
But at the same time, he did say, like, he's I'm swapping bubbles. He's, why are you doing that? He's just like, oh, you're leaving it better than you found it. So it's not like that guy wasn't getting anything out of it. It's like he's letting Cassian borrow the ship or whatever and do some upgrades to it.
inadvertently.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, so he lets him take it and bring it back, and no one knows about it, but he's making it better. And so this guy knows it. So, he's taking it out too,
Hmm.
running errands, So it's not like he's not getting anything out of it, but he's at the point where it's like, you're going to get me in trouble. You're going
Hmm.
to get me fired. We need to stop. We're done.
Right.
We're done. So,
And then we have one more cut back to Canary as the children head off towards the downed ship. And through more visual context, we're just assuming that Casa was saying, "Hey, I'm going off to do this thing." His sister was probably like, "Oh, can I come along?" No.
mhm.
You got to stay here and
I'll be back.
watch over everybody. Like that's kind of one thing that they always say. Watch the others. Like you're good at
Yeah.
that. And then and we get end credits. So very open ended segment to the first episode, and definitely piqued my interest towards, okay, where's the show going to go. I walked away from it feeling just really interested in what this particular part of the galaxy had to offer. Cassian, I find to be a very interesting character. He's definitely capable in many spectrums, and it's also nice to see like that on this particular home planet. Even though people are kind of sick of his crap to some degree, they're also gonna
He's
stand up
still a
for
likable
him.
character. Yeah.
Yeah, and but it's still like, but he also feels like he has to hide things from them. So there's a bit of that going on. Like nobody really knows what he's got going on. He has all of these different attributes, and it's like to me, it was just still very confusing, which is why I immediately jumped into watching, like two or three
Right.
more episodes after, just to figure out.
So just for context, you didn't watch this when it first aired, right?
No,
Okay.
no. And I don't
So
have any particular reason why. I think I just may have been watching other stuff.
like I said, I've already covered this once,
Mhm,
and I was watching it earlier to see what I said then, to see if my mindset from then to now was going to be changed.
mhm,
And uh, I'm definitely in a better place. I definitely like Cassian.
mhm.
He's definitely an interesting character. And I said, you have my attention,
Right,
and they still do. I mean, but I know where the story's going,
right.
but still, just to kind of, I need to, and this is not going to be good. I'm saying this. I'm finding that a second go through actually allows you to analyze. Having that first blush is good, but
Hmm.
you can go back since you've already know what's coming up. You can actually really look and pick it apart and analyze it, and maybe catch some things you didn't catch.
Right.
So that's kind of that. That says, with that theory, that means I have to watch Acolyte again, but it's going to be a while.
I don't think I can do that. Maybe there are probably two
Yeah,
episodes out of that host. I mean, the one where they first initially fight Keimer, and
yeah,
then the last episode. That's all I had
yeah,
the energy
the
for.
fight scenes of the last one, yeah.
Yeah, that is it.
But
I can't do it.
yeah, but for this one, I'm definitely, honestly, even Deputy Inspector, whatever Cyril, whatever his,
Yeah.
he's interesting enough for you to go, oh God, you're going to be trouble.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and even, I don't know. Yeah, even though I already know where this is going, you can kind of go, you're going through, like you were just saying, the local shakedown guy with Fetch, he could be a problem. The boyfriend
Right.
could be a problem. You're trying to, it's assets and allies at
Hmm.
this point, and you're just going through asset ally,
Right.
So I think they, as an opening deal, well, I guess I buried the lead. They aired the first three episodes in one at once. They released all three at
Okay.
once. So we definitely had the the benefit of watching episodes 1, 2, and 3 back to back,
Hmm.
and that way you weren't left kind of open ended, because I did still feel by the time we got to the end, and Cassie or Casa is walking away with the group, he's all excited and she's standing there, and you just get this feeling of dread, like, is he going to see her ever again? Because that's the sister he's looking for.
Right.
So you're left with that, oh God, what happened?
And that's why I, not necessarily that I was saving this question for the end of this, but I personally feel that based on how the show went, I think that it's totally good for a season two versus like the Acolyte.
Oh,
Nobody's going to green like that, but Andor too. Because I mean, are we to? because there had to have been events that took place in between the end of this season and um Rogue One.
Okay, so do you not know the whole point of this thing?
It's
Of
building up to, it should be
okay,
building up
so
to the Rogue
so
One
the last episode of Andor is leading
beginning.
directly into the beginning. So
Okay.
so I guess the thought process is the very last episode of this would be Cassian leaving to go where you see him the very first thing in Rogue One.
Right. So
So
there is no reason to question, will he find his sister? Will
uh,
we learn more about the whereabouts of Canary? It's
right.
just like it happened, that was a place in, that kind of sucks. I mean, and that's what I'm saying. What I was meant saying earlier about when I forgot that he was in Rogue One. It's like, oh
No.
man,
Yeah.
no, none of these none of this stuff will get answered. All my outside of the show questions are just,
Well,
you know,
okay, it does start, and this is what I question. It started 5 years before the Battle of
hmm
Yavin. Okay, so this is year one.
yeah,
This is year one. So there's gonna have to be we're gonna have to make some huge jumps.
yeah, too
So
huge.
yeah, well, it
There's
depends
still
on
time.
because I don't. I right. I can't see them doing 5 seasons. I
No,
can
no,
see
no, no,
them
no.
doing three.
Oof.
So I mean,
That would have
so
to depend on how good season two would be if they were to
yeah.
even do it.
Well,
I didn't
well,
know that they would be released the first three episodes in one shot. That is
well,
very on par for some of their shows. I
yeah.
think I
Well, they
mentioned that
did the
in
same thing.
Acolyte.
They did the same thing with Obi-Wan. I think Obi-Wan released the first two episodes.
Yeah. So they
So
know what's worthy of like I don't think they do that with Star Wars shows so much as with Marvel, where they know that it might flop, so they just release it all in one shot. There's at
uh,
least like that one show. There's a show that came out. They knew it wasn't going to be great, and they gave all 8 episodes in one go, and it wasn't well received as they thought because they were trying to
mm,
pander, and so they just. It's. I think it's good when they finally do have something where they're like, okay, we can kind of, you
I
know,
well,
give it break it down.
mm, I think they're trying to capture on the old week to week the weekly episode because we are
Yeah.
you're definitely getting more mileage out of releasing it on a
Yeah.
weekly basis. I mean, you're keeping people around a lot longer.
And the water
Whereas,
cooler talk.
yeah, exactly. As opposed to, what did you do this weekend? Oh, I binged XYZ,
Mhm.
and then it's a flash in the pan. Unless it's really good, then you get some longevity. At least with this, it kind of stretches it out. The only thing I would caution them with, and this in watching this episode this time,
Mm,
was there enough in one episode to make you go, I'm satisfied with, I'm hooked?
mhm.
So if they did or did not release the second episode the same night, was there enough to make me want to come back? Whereas I think at the end of Acolyte, gosh, it's so
It's so
recent.
new. Yeah, yeah.
I hate to have to keep referencing that, but I don't think at the end of Acolyte 1 it's just like, what did I just watch?
Right.
So but this at
All
least
right.
there's a lot of meat on this bone. We got a lot of information in this very first episode. So
Yeah.
I'm
Do you
definitely
think
on board now that but more than I was the first time I
do you
watched.
think that if it was only 2 episodes released, that would have been enough information for you to stay hooked and wait another week for an additional 2 episodes? Or do
Oh,
you think
absolutely.
that having that third one is what sold it? 'Cause I know why they did it. I mean, that's 12 episodes. That's tough to
you
some
know,
people.
so I don't know. I think 12 to me to get a well-rounded story, I think it takes about 12 episodes, especially if they're like anywhere from what 42 to somewhere around the
Ish.
42 45 minute
Yeah.
uh length.
Mhm.
12 episodes, that gives you plenty of time to to actually gain some steam. Whereas if it's like 6 to 8 episodes, you're trying to compress a lot of information in a short amount of time,
Yep.
and
That's
either it
what I
works or it
said.
doesn't. You
I was
know,
saying about Acolyte. And
yeah,
even if they did have 12 episodes, they'd have to rewrite the whole story. It'd have
yeah,
to be redone. I mean, because
yeah,
there's just so much that works for 8 episodes, and plenty that would have been that needed a lot more context.
yeah,
So, I
definitely.
mean, we could have waited to not see Carrie Ann Moss get killed off in,
If
the first
yeah,
episode, but
well,
at the same time, she was probably one
she,
of the highest paid actresses on the
well,
show.
but it's not like she got. It's not like Scream where what's her name gets killed off in the very first episode and she's done. You know, it's
Yeah.
she did
She
have
was still there,
she was
right?
throughout the thing. It's just it almost made the character pointless because already knew she was already dead. But
Right.
we're not
Right.
talking about Acolyte anymore. We're talking about Andor.
It's hard not to.
Right. So is I because that's pretty much everything. I mean, are
Yeah.
we okay?
Yep,
Well,
that's the end of episode 1.
so do you want to close it out or shall I?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, well, like I said, that was the end of episode 1 of Andor. The episode name was Casa. When I saw the first name, it was called Casa. I thought maybe that meant home, but
Mhm.
we find out that his name. And I'm intrigued. So we'll be back with episode 2, and I'm really looking forward to this. So
Yeah.
for Media and More, this has been the Mediocre Modeler,
And Andre from Indie Arts Midwest.
and we'll catch you next time.
See ya.
Pew 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 pew.